Buonasera a tutti. Abbiamo avuto una lezione veramente straordinaria da Matteo. Matteo, complimenti, sei stato fantastico, veramente. Per rispetto a David che arriva da Londra, abbiamo pensato di fare questa chiacchierata in inglese. Perdonate se il mio non sarà come quello suo, ma chiedo venia. Se qualcuno di voi vuole, ovviamente ha gli auricolari per la traduzione simultanea. Okay, so I have put down a few thoughts I would like to share with you. Maybe the first one could start from the last images you have shown, that were the ones of your wife's house. In the general imagination, historically, the use of wood in architecture has been linked to the architecture built on the mountains, mountain architecture. So my first question and thought is, what does it mean nowadays within the contemporary architecture to bring wood construction and wood architecture within the city, the metropolitan areas, and whatever comes with this complexity? What does bring wood in architecture within the city? You have built Tortona, big office complex in Milan with the use of wood. You have your point of view that's from the industry. This is the first thought I would like to share with you.
Good afternoon. I think if my interpretation of that question is, and I'm not an architect or a designer, but I understand creative use of materials and particularly of wood, and I think that connection. We live in a society and a world now that is changing so rapidly and is perhaps forgetting. It takes us away from where we came from, and we lose that disconnect with nature. You know, the challenge of this century is to re-engage with nature again, because we have to change the way we live, the way we build, the way we consume. And I think not only for me, wood is a wonderfully performing material. There's lots of attributes, but it makes a very strong connection back to nature. It's one of those materials that you can use in its natural form. And that's very rare, that's unusual, that can be very refreshing. And I think, you know, for me, I'd be interested in, you know, Matteo's thought on that. But I see that connection of using wood in city buildings or in public architecture as a way of connecting. And then you go back and you see how it was used traditionally. There are many, many examples of wood structures and wood use that goes back a very, very long way. So that durability of nature can also be brought into today's, you know, modern city design.
I want to answer as a banker. It's hard to get money if you want to build. Money for 2 or 3 months you have from every bank. Money for 2 or 3 years is very, very difficult. That's why in Italy we nearly stopped construction. That's why wood is better, because it's faster.
Talking about the issue of time, that was one of the Italo Calvino thought, quickness. Nowadays the concept of time has almost vanished. Everything is immediate. We have to react with a quickness that is almost impossible, unbearable. There was a quality, I would say, in the respect of the flow of time that we have lost due to technologies and the need of also the issue of financing projects and whatever. But my thought is, what comes next? Where are we going? Are we able to be even quicker? Are we losing quality because of the need of immediate result? what's the challenge that faces the industry, and what's the challenge that are facing you as an architect?
Maybe I would like to answer remembering when I showed you pictures from my Swatch period. When I was an art director of producing up to 60 watches per one collection twice a year, I had a fantastic chance to do the first electric car, the Swatch car. Swatch car later on became smart, which I consider a disaster because it's not ecologic at all, it's very expensive, and it looks late Baroque. Why was this one of my biggest failures? Because it was in the early 90s far too early. Right now, Toyota and some other companies start to do reasonable electric city cars. So you have to do everything, whatever you do, you have to do it in the right moment. This was a problem of my master Ettore Sozzas. When he was a hippie in the early 60s with long hairs, nobody trusted him. He was very lucky because at a certain point he met a certain genius called Adriano Olivetti, and he said, I trust you, you do the first computer.
David.
Yes, that whole question of timing, I completely agree with. There is a constant sort of evolution of, how we look at materials, how we look at products, how we see architecture in relation to our current situation, and the timing is certainly right now to make strong connections between environmental needs and cost, being efficient with materials, we're going to be driven more and more by cost, but also by those environmental considerations. And I think we're entering a new era for wood as a material in building, because you could liken it to your example with the car. If you tried to do some of the things that we're now doing in wooden construction 30 years ago, that timing wouldn't have been right. The industry wasn't yet ready to deliver those solutions that give this material, just because a material's been around for thousands of years, we've been using it, doesn't mean to say we should keep using it in the same way. We want to respond to the current situation. And I think what's very exciting at the moment is that the industry is catching up with the intentions and vision and ideas that are coming out creatively, and they're coming up with practical, technical, cost-effective solutions that turns, as you I'm intrigued that you said of all this wonderful portfolio of projects, the most important commission that you won is the City of Wood in Germany, because that is something of right now of extreme importance. We need low-cost housing. We need, in England, it's still a big challenge for us to house people. There's parts of the world where, I know architects get involved in humanitarian work and, providing shelter and that kind of thing. And there are challenges at all levels.
When you say that industry is catching up, I would say that the opposite can be true as well, because the innovation in technologies and material that we have seen in the last decades are so amazing that today everything is possible. You think, you design something inside your head in the creative phase, by any chance you can build it. So usually when we have boundaries, we try to challenge the boundary. When the boundaries are not anymore there, I would say we look for boundaries because we feel lost. How do you feel about that? And what's your thought, Matteo, when you when you create architecture, do you feel you have boundaries, and if not, are you looking for them?
That's a good question. I think in the last 5 years we started to learn about the complexity of networking. In fact, City of Wood, this international competition, we won because the company who is working with us in the development is probably number one. So we are not the decision makers of being the best, but we were the best team.
Yes, no, I mean, I would agree. When I meant catching up, I think what I meant is being able to respond to the creative demands of now. That I think I would also agree. You could argue that actually within our sector we're beginning to push those boundaries so that that response is working the other way, and you know, architects and designers are looking at some of the technology and saying, wow, that now enables us to do this or to do that very quickly or to do something in a different way, but still and still encompass you know, the interest of the material, but you are pushing the boundaries that, you know, in the way you can use it. So yeah, who is leading? I mean, for me the important thing is we're here. You know, this is an industry that you know, I think has, for the building sector, is coming alive again as a major player and innovator, and that's very exciting. I come from a life of wood, and I've always wanted to see you know, a better understanding or a better application of it, and these are difficult economic times, but potentially quite exciting, some of the challenges.
I would like to share with you a more basic thought. As long as we have in front of us many students that will become architects and will have to face the complexity of being an architect, in the real world, who does the choices? Who chooses to use wood? Are you free in your projects? Of course, yes, when you're doing a competition, but when you have a client, how do you share the decision of using wood as a structure or as a finish, as a cladding or interior material? Do you share this with your clients? Is their thought? Is your thought? Is the thought of someone else? How does it work? You know, it's a banal question for you maybe, but I think that for students, it gets a glimpse of how it works within the relationship of the design process.
I thank you for placing this question to all the students, because I think it's a crucial question. If you start a project, you have to keep in mind value for money. If you are not aware on the cost structure of your dream, then you are lost. Then you will never build. The client will never ask, is it concrete, is it wood, is it steel? He wants the product for the right price as fast as possible.
That was iconical.
I think also, though, because we've talked about this before, that it's the interpretation of the right material for the right context. And you said to me once that, you know, you were involved in a project in the desert, and you wanted to use a soft material, and you had a disagreement with the client about the choice of material, not just necessarily about cost. So, I mean...
Sorry for my radical answer. You are absolutely right. In the desert, for example, it's too dry, and you can't use wood like you use the wood in the Alps. So, the right material in the right place.
You mentioned the power of economy. Of course, this is a crucial issue, but I would say that if the challenges and the difficulties of this year have taught us, is that there is no real success in a financial operation or in a industrial operation if you don't have also built the right culture that gives the floor for the success of what you're doing. So in a way, I think that the vision of David that is not the one of someone who is selling a product, but is someone who is trying to build the culture that lies behind the product is very important. And I would like to ask you, what's your approach? How do you? I know you love the relationship with not only with the architects but also with the artists, the designer. You like to cross words and put them together to create debate, discussion. Is this a way of strengthening the culture of the use of wood and the sensitivity towards architecture at large?
It's an interesting point. I mean, for me, information is power. That is the authority to do something, is to have that information and be informed. And I think quite often, whatever industry or profession you work in, you can live in bubbles very easily and in your own world with your own issues. And I'm very lucky in what I do that I cross a number of sectors and industries, and I get to see the potential and the interest and, you know, seeing people come together and collaborate or share visions or ideas from different sectors. And that's where those beginnings or processes come from. So I think we've learned. We all love wood, and we say we do. We touch it. You know, if it's there and it's saying we feel it. We want to connect with it. But do we really understand it? Its history, its story, where it's come from, how we can use it, what is available to use. It's such a huge world that there needs to be much more dialogue and discussion, so that we all become a bit more informed. And the wood industries need to listen to the architects much, much more. You know, let's hear what those issues are so that we can respond. Other industries are doing that. We must do the same. But equally, we must find platforms where we can also share our ideas. And it's, as you've said on your projects, where it comes together and you've got inspiration in industry that can interpret your ideas, you get your best work. Or you feel you're most productive, I think. It's true.
Vuoi commentare questo?
I mean, do you feel, Matteo, as an architect who embraces wood as a material, that there is enough response from industry to what you're trying to do? What more can we do?
We have a lot of problems in the dialogue with the industry. Most of the problems derive from a complete misunderstanding by treating the surface of wood beginning in the 60s. If you go back in the 60s, the chemical industry started to sell colors and lacquered surfaces. If you remember, in the 60s, all wooden furniture were high gloss, very shiny, super elegant. I hate that, because it could be plastic, could be anything else. Like this table in front of me, underneath is wood, but for me it's like sensoriality. What Calvino, what Tzotzas is asking for from the beginning of their life, all they ask is the multi-sensoriality. As Goethe mentioned, you touch with your eyes and you feel with your fingers. And what does it mean? Never ever treat the surface with chemicals. Leave them natural, brushing, eliminating the soft part of the wood so it lasts longer and you have a better life cycle for the surface. So the real problem is not wood, the real problem is the chemical industry.
About the issue of chemical industry, who is against wood says that wood is not sustainable. For using wood, you cut trees. That's not sustainable. For using wood, you have to build an industrial process. We know that the contrary is true nowadays. But still, we have students in front of us who are building their culture, and I would like to please, David and also Matteo, from your point of view, explain us why wood is sustainable and how wood is sustainable.
It's
in short terms. We don't have a week.
I'm glad he said that. I could talk all night about it. The word sustainable is very interesting as well. You know, I mean, it's a very misused word, I think, sometimes. I think when it comes to things like architecture design, it's responsibility, really, that's more important. But in terms of is wood sustainable, the real definition of sustainable is you've got more material than you're using. You've got surplus. And we've had such a difficult time over the last 20 years or more because of, quite rightly, you know, very public focus on large areas of the world that have been deforested. And it's drawn attention to the importance of forests and the role certainly they can play in terms of climate change. But what happens when we lose them, we get very nervous. But at the same time, large areas of the world have increased. So actually we've got to look at our sort of basket of wood fibre on a global basis. So when I first started in my working career, there was almost a fear for using wood. Well, we love wood, but we're being told not to use it, and we certainly shouldn't use hardwood because the forests are being destroyed. And again, it's back to information. You know, if you've got the information, the real story. At the moment, there's a lot of misinformation about things like fast regenerating fibre. You know, let's grow it all. Nature does the job better than we can ever do. I mean, there are many issues, but it is a renewable, potentially sustainable resource. Therefore, does its costs work? Will it perform? Do we like the look of it? All this comes later. My current, what's driving my mind at the moment is that a new factor that's going to come into the decisions we make about what we buy and consume will be a real environmental demand. We're going to have to change, you know, the way we consume and build, and I think that is going to have environmental consequences that will be forced on us.
Statistically, we have one problem on the planet Earth. This is the Amazonas in Brazil. The European wood is 1/3 of surplus every year. That means we can use 1/3 more than we actually use. That means let's go on.
Yeah, thank you. You heard it here. But no, it's right.
A big challenge of architecture is about the reuse of what we build today for current needs in relationship to the needs of tomorrow. A good example can be what is happening now in your city, in London, for the Olympic Games, because they have seen the issues that Beijing has faced of the Olympic Village that has become a sort of desert area of Beijing, because they don't need it anymore after the Olympics. So in London they tried to do it differently. They tried to understand how to build a village, a new part of town that can be used for certain needs which are huge during the Olympics and will change completely afterwards. So starting from this example, how are we challenging tomorrow with architecture? We build for today but the uses can change very quickly nowadays, much more than in the past.
It's a good question. You're at an advantage because you've seen the Olympic Village and I haven't. I know you told me earlier. How much of something like the Olympics is, political, really? Let's use this opportunity, spending an incredibly large amount of money. And our excuse for doing it is to regenerate and really do things we should have done already. And I have quite strong views about the Olympics, which perhaps is not the time to share them now, but certainly in terms of an opportunity, if we're going to build this infrastructure, we're going to spend all this money, we should have done something that was forward-thinking in terms, certainly in terms of material. I mean, there was a lot of talk about, use more wood, here's an opportunity, be sustainable, it's all about being sustainable. And in the end, really, the wood use within the Olympic projects, a lot of it is tokenism, it's a bit of decoration. There are a lot of steel and concrete buildings. So for me, it hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked.
But it hasn't worked in a demonstration of future requirements for architecture. Will those villages work as a second or third, generation application? If we'd started with that same money, with a clear slate, no Olympics, just think what we could, and a new vision, what could we have done? So I don't quite follow. I think there will be a legacy. I'm sure they will make something from it. I can't comment on other cities, I don't have experience, but I still think that something like the Olympics is not the excuse, really. We should be doing it anyway. We should be investing anyway in our infrastructure. We should be providing, good, comfortable design, low-cost housing. We can do it, but we have to change the way the construction industries go about things in order to do it. And we have to be receptive to changing our approach, I think.
Thank you. In your introduction, you mentioned that the profile of an architect did really change over the last years, and you mentioned the word of life cycle manager. I think that's the real topic we should discuss today, and for the students coming out now, life cycle management means that you have in mind how to build something, but in the very same moment, you have to think how you can eliminate at the end of the life cycle the building. You can demolish, you can reuse, you can fire, or you can rebuild it somewhere else. And the only material you really can manage life cycle of a construction site is wood. For one only reason, because patina is a quality after years and years, and second is the lightest construction material available.
A lighter question about the cross of worlds. Architecture can be considered one of the arts. So how do you relate? How do you think, in your approach, in your point of view, architecture relates to art, to design, to graphic, to literature? You have shown us, because you made an incredible comparison between literature and architecture, and maybe also cinema. We can drop this question if you want.
No, it's very simple. My heroes are Richard Long, the well-known artist from UK, who is doing pictures when he walks through the planet, when he walks through the desert. He's using wood, he's using stones, and he's using the sense of reality we are surrounded. I like pop artists as well, but Richard Long, for the time being, is my real hero for my architectural project.
For you, another one.
You're asking, well, my inspiration, because I've always appreciated landscapes, is the current I forget his name, the exhibition in London at the moment.
The London Design Festival?
Sorry, mine went blank. David Hockney. I went to his recent exhibition in London, and it was just extraordinary to see that colour interpretation. It makes you realise that you look at a landscape or a design or a bit of architecture, whatever it is, in his case landscapes, and he just sees it and in a completely different way. And I was also intrigued by how the paintings changed when he was working sometimes directly out in the woods or on location. There was a very different interpretation of colour and shadow and light than when he was working from memory and with photographs in the studio. So it's not really about the subject, but I think we can take inspiration from all art forms.
Let's close with a very crucial thing for students. Architecture is a creative process. Architecture is a industrial process. It's a construction process. But first of all, and this has to be taught to the students, architecture is a huge responsibility, because art can be hidden. When you build architecture, it's there, and it will last, I would say forever, but for very long. So what's your suggestion for the students about the responsibility of being an architect in front of the society, or being involved in the industry of architecture?
I would link that back to what Matteo just said, one of the most important things about life cycle impacts. We've got to learn the real impacts of what we do, how we live, how we build, how we interact with our infrastructure. And I think we still don't realize, we talk sometimes very glibly about carbon footprint and, oh, I fly around the world, I've got a big carbon footprint. Or in our case, a lot of architects saying, well, why should we use wood fibre from North America? We've got wood fibre in Europe. Surely that is unenvironmental. But actually, transport by sea is a tiny impact. So industries are beginning to look at things like scientific, transparent life cycle analysis, starts to tell them where the impacts are, and we're actually learning. Sometimes it's changing our thinking. And I think if we can use mechanisms like that, again, it's coming back to being informed. I think the design community, from the point of view of industry, I think the design community will do the responsible thing. There is no doubt that can come, but not unless they have the tools, the knowledge, in order to be able to make those right decisions. So that's for me. I think this life cycle management, it's a difficult thing to communicate, but we're going to have to learn. I think it's going to influence a lot of what we do in industry, in the creative arts, within our social networks.
I would like to give an answer to you, David, and to you about complexity. The youngsters are completely overloaded. The complexity is terrible. The problem of software, updating of software, is exceeding the human capacities. And that brings me to one recommendation to all of you. In order to have fun in our job, as you say, it's all about the joy and the pleasure of being creative. You lose it in the very same moment when you decide for certification complexity. Certification is necessary, but choose self-certification and give up all this ugly, terrible complexity of regional, national, or European certifications. This, I am totally convinced, I say something absolutely anarchic, but after years of trying to certificate and following the US lead or the UK or the German DGNB, made of something like 12,000 pages where they explain what you have to do in order to become certificated. Give up. Have fun and go on with the pleasure of a fantastic job.
Thank you. That was a great suggestion.